Thank you for joining us here on the Frank Sontag podcast. We drop every Friday at 1 o'clock Pacific, primarily on YouTube, but we're on the other outlets as well. We're on Rumble, which is my favorite, and The Usual. So my guest in studio is a good friend. I've known him for a number of years, and he is actually, I won't say my right-hand man in ministry. He basically has run KMG for years. He is the executive director, a man of many hats. Mike Johnson, welcome to the Frank Sontag podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here finally.
It's good to see you. We've been trying to do this for a while.
A long time.
And you have probably 18 different irons in the fire, so every time we get something going, you're like, I got to play fireman, and I can't do it this week.
Right. It's just tough being athletic director at Heritage Christian and still helping with KMG some, and just father of 3, husband, 30 years. It's just, it's tough. So I'm glad to finally be here. It's awesome.
It's good to see you. And Heritage is around the corner because I drove past it. I dropped Dante off at school late today. I overslept, and I didn't realize it's that close.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, Dante is my favorite Sontag. Let's just be clear about that from the beginning of this thing. If he would have asked me to do the podcast, I would have done it that week. But no, Heritage, great Christian school right up in North Hills, and I'm lucky to get to see your son every day.
So I had said off air about a direction we would go in, but we're going to go in a different direction now that you said that.
That's how you work.
So you have a background and a love for sports.
Yeah.
You were a college basketball coach for years. You're now the athletic director at Heritage Christian. And as I told my guests, jump off wherever you want. Did you always have an affinity for sports growing up? Talk a little bit about how you ended up in the coaching ranks of all things.
Yeah, I think I grew up in Ohio, small farm town, 5,000 people, where sports, athletics is everything, right? It's football. They've won, I think, 3 state championships in the last 10 years. It's a little bit like Hoosiers. The cars line up, go through the cornfields to go play. When I was there, it actually wasn't football that was great. It was actually basketball that was better. I was a basketball player, and basketball was always kind of my thing. And I think I grew up without a father. I had some stepfathers, and they were not good. And so my coaches were always my influence. And so I think I knew I wasn't good enough. At one point, we had a Division I player on our team back then, and I remember my coach literally telling me, and he was a man who could speak into my life, but held me accountable. It was a different time. You know, you could coach kids hard. But he literally said to me, "You're too short and you're too white to go play." He said, "Don't let him take the ball out of your hands." And I remember thinking, like, what does that mean? Like, all I know is playing. And he said, "You're a point guard and you have a coach's brain. You should do that." And I literally chose Purdue University, where I graduated from, because at that time in 1987, they were number 1 in the country. I didn't care about a college education. I just thought, well, I'm going to go learn how to coach at a place that's number 1 in the country. And that's how I chose Purdue and went to school there, and then knew at that point I wanted to be a college basketball coach, and worked really hard to do whatever I could. Tie ties, go to Burger King for the coaches and get Whoppers, like little things like that, just so that I could eventually work myself into Division I coaching and move to California, and that's kind of how it went down.
So you know me well enough. I know you trust me in this kind of medium. So let's hang on here. My first thought as you share that was, so sports, basketball from then till now, pretty much the same, isn't it?
Or not at all. I'm lucky enough, as well as the athletic director at Heritage, I'm also an assistant basketball coach. And the way we have to coach kids now compared to the way they were coached in 1986, 87 is totally different. And I even, from when I got out of college coaching in 2000, I don't know, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, I see the adjustments that you make even from then, both in the game, in the X's and O's, as well as in how you have to explain to this generation and coach them differently. I would say, and I've been listening to a lot of Coach Hurley, where UConn won. I don't think you have to coddle kids anymore, but they definitely want to know the why. Mm-hmm. And so you can't just yell. You have to yell and then say, and here's the why, and then hold them accountable on the why. We didn't get our coaches back in. They didn't care if we knew the why. They just said, you do this and you do this. Yep. And we did it. There wasn't parent meetings. Like my mom never went in and talked to my coach about anything. Like that was not a thing. Now it's all about parent meetings. I feel like half my job at Heritage Christian as the athletic director is meeting with parents about they're disappointed in this, they're disappointed in that, they're disappointed in this. So again, I don't think it's the kids that have changed. It's the parents have changed, and there's not as much accountability. There's not as much allowing your children to fail.
Oh boy.
It's more of we're in constant bubble wrap around them, and then they always need explanations.
To reiterate that point, not that this is the end all, I had Rob McCoy in here last week. He was an All-American water polo player and a swimmer, and he talked about when he was at the height of training back then. I said, so, was your coach hard on you? And he looked at me, he goes, let me tell you a story. So it's a Saturday morning. He said we were always in the water, whether it's heated or not. This particular morning, it was very cold, but he's like, get in. And he had us do X amount of rotations, and we had to have 5-second intervals or you had to do it over again. And I don't remember exactly the time, but it started early in the morning. And he said at one point he realized there was only 4 of the swimmers there. At one point he realized, I can't do this. So his father was a Navy admiral. This particular coach had a background in the Navy. I think he was a SEAL. I'm probably butchering the story and have part of it right, part of it not, but here's the gist. He said about halfway through, he said, I'm dying. And I realized I can't do it. And my dad's coming to pick me up, so he's going to save me. His dad shows up. Hey, Admiral, how you doing? Hey, I'm going to keep Rob a little while today. And Rob's like, and his dad goes, okay, see you later. Rob's like, wait. He knew on some level there's a method to the madness. He said, well, they were in the pool till 11:30. And he said he is exhausted. He finally gets it done. And the coach said, you learned 2 things today. Something to the effect of you always have a deeper level to go, and it's not always as bad as you think. So point of the story is, this would have been abuse, right? But yet back then, there was something about teaching young men perseverance, adversity. So all that to say this, and if you have anything, let's go for it. I struggle with, how do I want to say this? The youth, the generation that you deal with now. And I want to broad stroke it like they're soft, they're weak, but I know that's not entirely true. Coach Herrick rebuked me during the interview.
Right.
He said, I know a lot of strong young men, Frank, be careful. But manhood, and we'll get into KMG in a little bit. So I guess the question would be your level and expertise of being a D1 coach. Now you're at the high school. You've watched young kids come and go. What's going on here? What's going on with our youth? Is it culture? You mentioned parents. Are we in a crisis? Is this one generation in, one generation out? Everybody's different?
I think it's a parenting crisis. I think in a lot of ways, the kids are much tougher than I was in 1987. Now, I was pretty tough. Again, my mom's a loving mom, but she had a bad picker. And I think, for her, her true love died at, when she was 26, and she was always trying to replace that, and everything she replaced it with. I feel like I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt that she wanted a male in my life. The problem is every male she picked beat the hell out of me. And so coaches were just super important to me. I joke, my mom's 85 and she's a war horse. Like, she's fighting cancer. She's going to treatment every day right now, and she's dating a guy who's 86. And I jokingly said to him when they first started dating, no, this is the next guy that's going to beat the hell out of me. And that's sad because it was really the first thing I felt in my heart.
Yeah. Even
Even though I'm 55, I felt like, oh my gosh, you go straight back to that PTSD. But I also feel like the kids nowadays have access to information that you and I never had access to. They can see things. They can have access all the time to things. So the why to them is important because they have options all the time. They can just leave. I went to a high school I couldn't leave. There was no other options for me. There was the local Catholic high school. I actually got thrown out of that. So I had no other options. They have options. They watch basketball at a much higher level than I ever did in 1987 too. I like to watch games too, but you got to back then you watched the ABC game of the week on Saturday.
That's it.
And it was Larry Bird. So I didn't have access to, now they go home and watch 6, 7, 8 games a week. So again, I don't think it's the kids, because I see our kids go through some pretty tough things. Now, there are some soft kids, but I'm probably pretty sure there were soft kids in 1987 as well. But the way people parent nowadays, and I'm not saying I got it right as a parent, but they're so protective. We don't allow our kids to fail anymore. And I think that's the crisis that we're starting to see, is victimhood, because they've been told they're victims since they're 3 if anything goes wrong in their life. You tell that story about Rob, his dad literally said, okay, figure it out. I've always felt, whether it's in ministry or coaching or parenting, that comfort zone is the killer.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I always joke when I speak that coach, pastor, father all kind of translate the same in the original language. I'm not really joking. And so I feel like you're always kind of in those modes, and I try to stay in those modes. I'm blessed as an athletic director and as a coach, because I still am pastoring just like I did when I had a church. I just get to pastor kids that want the same thing as I do. So that's a pretty great thing. You also have to build a lot of equity with kids before you can speak deeply into their hearts nowadays. My coach had great equity just because he was a male. I didn't have that in my life. And he was doing something, he held the keys to what was most important to me, which was basketball. Again, these kids have so many options. Yes, they love basketball and they train at a much different level and all that stuff. But if you don't build equity into their lives and they understand that you care for them, then you can't speak to them like maybe I do. I'm still old school hard on our kids, but that's because I have tons of equity and I have kids coming in to my office and spending time with me. I take kids on trips to see different colleges. I do all these things so that I can then yell at them. My wife's always like, "You're so grumpy." No, I'm not. I'm holding them accountable.
That's right.
But I have to do all that other stuff, and coaches have to do all that other stuff now to even let the parents see that you can do that.
Mike Johnson is my guest. You sharing that reminds me of, I had one interaction with Bobby Knight. I don't need to get into it, but Bobby Knight was known for being in your face, and yet the majority of players that played at Indiana loved him.
Right.
I think of Joe Hillman, who was a local guy at Glendale. He said he was like the greatest guy, community-oriented, all that stuff. Is that a dying breed?
I think it's dead.
Oh, wow.
I think that's why you see guys getting out of the profession. Saban, all these guys that were those guys, you can't do that anymore. And so I think they see themselves as, I'm not going to compromise who I was. And they've probably started compromising somewhat. And then I just think it's tough. Again, that's why I'm a Purdue alum and I'm a Purdue fan, but it was not hard for me to root for UConn to beat Purdue, because I see Hurley trying to do that stuff. He's trying to hold him accountable. He's going to work. He tells him, you're going to come here. It's for a serious reason. We're not here to just jack around. So I think maybe there's a little bit of resurgence in it. But I think coaching, like as an athletic director, I have to guide my coaches a lot on how they talk to kids. I oftentimes will tell, I have a 72-year-old baseball coach who's unbelievable. He's done nothing but coach baseball his entire life. He's won CIF titles. He's won like 16 league titles. He's done everything, but he's an old grumpy guy. And he's deaf. So he's always talking loud and grumpy, and soft kids now, right, they think that he's yelling at them. I tell him all the time, it's not the wins and losses that will get you fired. It's how you treat the kids. Mm-hmm. When I coached at USC, the athletic director there was Mike Garrett. And we got fired in the middle of the season, or the head coach did, Coach Bibby did, and we had to stay on. But he brought us in. He said, I let it go until I couldn't. I don't want to get into what that meant. But that's kind of my philosophy as an athletic director is I let it go until I can't, until the noise is so loud, then you have to make a move.
There's an interwoven theme here, one of many, and it's manhood, masculinity. So let me get into kind of our ministry partnership and how all that began and what we've done at KMG by the Lord's blessing. So a number of years ago, I met you through mutual friend, had you on my radio program when I was on the air in the afternoons, and we kind of hit it off. And then we had a day where you said, hey, you want to go visit a player of mine who's been in a coma forever, which is a wild story in and of itself, and I know he just passed. But that afternoon, after we spent some time together, for me, the ducks kind of lined up like I'd been praying, Lord, I need somebody to come in and to run KMG that's got a heart for men. And we just kind of commiserated, and it was undeniable. And this is, I don't know, 5 years ago? I don't know how long it's been. 7 years? Okay, so this is wild. So whether it's coaching, whether it's in ministry, you and I, among many things, we've got a heart for men and manhood, and maybe it's born out for me. I didn't have a dad either, all that stuff. So let's talk about KMG a little bit. And we're in a new season, of which I want to get into in a moment, because my Wednesday night men's group, the guys that went to man camp, every Wednesday they talk about your sermon Saturday morning and how you lit a fire in them with the go time. Well, we'll get to that in a moment. You have a full-time gig at Heritage Christian. You've got a lot of irons in the fire. So KMG's kind of going through different incarnations now. But talk about men's ministry, anything that comes up. And I don't want to bang on the churches too hard. Maybe that'll be my portion of this question. But men's ministry, we doing really good in Christian circles, guys knowing who they are in the Lord. We're all strong. We're all warriors for Christ, and we read our Bibles. We're doing really well in this area.
No. Again, I was pastoring a church, and I'm watching men just struggle, right? I think being a man is really hard. I had somebody in my office yesterday, and they just screwed up. And I think they were ready for me to rebuke them, and I said, it's hard. If you and I had to deal with what young men have to deal with now, with accessibility to porn, just the world that social media has created, if I would have had to deal with that, well, I would have been canceled because I was a heathen. I would have been canceled. And so I feel like they're at a super disadvantage anyway. Then you take into account that 50% of them don't have dads, or at least a broken marriage. And the dad is so essential to the development of a young man. I don't want to think that I got anything really right with parenting, but I did make up a mind because I came from a spot with no parent, no father, that I was going to be super intentional with my kids. That sounds like a ridiculous statement. Like you should, if you're having kids, you should be super intentional anyway. But I wanted them, I had an uncle and a grandfather who did really put me in tough situations and helped me develop in a lot of ways as men. And I wanted to make sure that I was doing the same thing for them, because I do feel like in men are being, a lot of fathers, this is a real theme for me right now. You got to put your kids in position to fail. It's really hard when they're broken and they're down and they're beat up. And that's going to happen to every kid or every young man. They've got to be able to work through that so that they have that skill when they're 40 and they're a husband and something really tough goes on. In this world, it's easy to just cover off for them and make it okay. And then they never learn the faith that it took to get through that situation.
And they never learned that they've got that in them,
right,
to get through it.
So I don't know that a lot of guys right now know that they have that in them to get through a tough situation. Yep. And so now the world's tougher. I think Satan's got way more tools. Maybe not. I mean, you do read the Bible and you realize things were bad back then too. But the tools that he has, if you don't know that you have the intestinal fortitude to get through something, do you get through it or do you bail? And I think in America right now, there's a bail theory. I'm just going to restart. I'm going to cancel her. I'm going to cancel my kids. I'm going to try again. I think that's tough. And a lot of that is, again, I don't quite have the gripe with the churches you do. But I do see holes in churches, and we talk about it all the time as KMG. But men, I think, let's take out just biblical masculinity. Let's just talk about being men. I don't know that we know what it's like to get through anything. I tell my kids all the time, if there's actually a war with China, we lose in 3 days. Because they are taught to get through things. I don't think men in the United States between the ages of 18 and 25. Again, I'm not saying they're soft.
Right.
But with everything that goes on, they don't have to complete a lot of tough things. Because as parents now, we try to make it easier for them all the time. And so by the time they get to the age of 24, and one wants to marry my daughter, I want to make sure that he's got the intestinal fortitude to be a good husband and a good father. That's my thing when I look at KMG. I think that's what makes KMG great is you have an angle, a lens that you look at it at. I look at it from a different angle, and then together it's a great marriage. But for me, that's the whole. I don't even think you can. Then when we started adding the component of Christianity to it, reading your Bible, prayer, fasting, all that stuff, you can't even talk about that stuff in my mind until you get to this stuff.
That's right.
Because this is advanced calculus. This is basic math. And in 1800, 1900, 2000 years ago, this was just, you had to do it. You didn't have a choice. You had to go hunt to stay alive. You had to, I think one of my kids was in 8th grade. We took the Washington, D.C. trip. And I go along as a chaperone. One of the days we go to an Amish house, an Amish farm. They take the kids to see how the Amish live life, right? And you're with 8th graders. 8th grade boys, that's tough. I know you survived it. We go down into a basement of a farm, and there's, 50 of us? And they bring an Amishman in, and the parents and the kids are allowed to ask anything they want.
Wow.
Right? I'm already uncomfortable knowing that some jackwad 8th grade kid is going to say something stupid about, I literally had a kid, and we still joke at our house, ask when we were at George Washington's house, is this where they grew the cheese? Oh. So we've got this Amishman down there, and a dad asks about, what do they call it? Banishment, when you get sent away.
Exile?
I think there's another word, but yeah, we're on the same thing.
Yeah.
When someone in the family, in the Amish family, screws up, they get sent away, and then they're allowed to work their way back into it. So this is a big discussion. This guy's not bound; he's not breaking at all. And he goes, "Well, what about divorce?"
Ooh.
And this guy, this Amishman, looks at him. He goes, "We don't have divorce." And it got really quiet. And now I'm kind of paying attention. I'm like, "What does that mean?" He goes, when there's troubles, and there's troubles, no marriage is perfect. I know, Aaron. We come along with the family and we fix it. Like the women take the women and the men take the men, and we put them in the right spots. And we know what God meant when he talked about marriage. And so there's no divorce. Well, if I had a complaint about the rest of the church, that would be that we don't have that. We might say we do. But is there really just groups of people that are going to surround? Now, again, this is a tight-knit community. They're out in the middle of nowhere. They're not watching TV. They're not doing any of this stuff. But it stuck with me. They're doing the hard things, but really it's just the basic things. And now we use the cancel culture, and we're out on everything.
When you share that story, a lot of things go through my mind, but primarily, first and foremost, they are bent out of a history And I use the term distraction. They don't have distractions. They're not necessarily technologically savvy. Everything is to the earth, where you don't have the course of a day where you're checking your phone 87,000 times and you're into social media. You actually probably have dinner and sit across from your family where you don't have to put the phones away and have a conversation. And we look at our culture and we're so distracted. We're just running 80 million miles an hour. You talked a little bit about early on the youth and all the navigating they have to go through with the culture. And I played that video for you before we started about influencers, and one guy was very brash about his contempt for certain guys in the position of being high profile and what are they doing with their lives. There's so much to navigate through. And so the question that comes to mind, excuse me, as we talk about the Amish.
Did you think we were going to talk about the Amish?
No, but that's what I love about you.
As you said that, I just started laughing. I'm like, we talk about the Amish. Have you had their cheese? Oh, sorry.
We can learn from them. Goodness. I mean, we got to slow down. We got to get off our phones. We got to stop chasing. My old spiritual teacher used to call it fool's gold. Like, the answer is not out there. The answer is right here, right now.
Yeah, I think, I know you did this last week with your kid where you just went away. I waited a little long, but I've just started this once a year where I just go away with my boys are 25 and 23, but even the oldest one who's married and is a pastor, just go away. And we go to a Cincinnati Bengals game or we go somewhere and it's just me and them. And they have the ability to just say what's on their mind. It's a safe I use the safe spot. But they just know there's a trust there.
Yeah.
Where if there's a question, they're able to ask it, answer it. Making time at the dinner table. We had a really great discussion the other day. We were talking about, again, this is going to come off sounding terrible, but my daughter-in-law said something about one of the biggest adjustments she had when she married into the family is that we sit down for an hour and have dinner. Even if it's a crappy dinner that we ordered, we still sit there for an hour and we just talk. We talk about politics. We talk about Jesus. We talk about sometimes nothing, sometimes about stupid things. And she was like, that was somewhat new to me. And that was something my wife always carved into it. Because, again, when I was coaching Division I was on the road a lot. So when I was home, she wanted that. And that was just something that our kids just know. Weirdly, the other thing that we started doing during COVID is walking. My 23-year-old walks with us every night. I don't care what's going on. If I say, hey, we're going to take the dogs for a W because you can't say the word out loud or it's chaos.
Yep.
He's like, I'm in. And yeah, he's not perfect and he's frustrating at times and all that stuff. But I say to my wife, what a blessing that he's okay walking with his mom and dad. But I think that was because my wife carved that time out. And we did. We made sure we took trips together. We made sure that, I was always trying to put my boys, not so much my daughter, but my boys in the uncomfortable positions. I wanted them to feel pressure when I could still watch it.
That's right.
And I could still monitor it. And they'd had to problem solve something out. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm not a 4.2. I don't even think we had AP classes back then. I was a farm boy, but I can problem solve. That's what people pay me money for. And I wanted them in positions to have to do that. How do I problem solve for them? So literally 6 and 7 years old, we're taking a hike. I wanted them to lead. You guys are in charge. You guys got to go 20 yards in front of us and you got to find the path. Mom's like, well, that's too far. What if a mountain lion comes out? Well, if a mountain lion comes out, we're all dead anyway. So putting them in uncomfortable positions. I think that was a coaching style that I probably got from my high school coach. He wanted us in uncomfortable positions so that when something real happens, that feeling's already in there, right? That success is already in there. I think that's gone from men nowadays. And I think it's our job. I have above my desk at the school developing men of purpose. That's what it says. And I tell parents when I meet with them, I'm partnering with you in that. How do we develop men of purpose? How do we make them good husbands? How do we make them good citizens? How do we make them viable around here where they're not just consumers, but they're contributors? I think that's the shift that men have to take and I don't think it's too late. I think you can do it with your 30-year-old kid, is how do I develop that out of them where they become contributors to society and not just consumers? Because there's two people in the world. There's consumers and contributors.
That's right.
And you know them. You know exactly when you say it out loud. If I say a name, you'll be like, contributor. Oh, that's definitely a consumer. I didn't want my kids to be consumers because those are the people you don't want to be around in life. And those are also the people generally that blow through things, blow through relationships. They don't understand the value of things. Contributors understand that. And so I think when I look at KMG, are we developing men that can contribute to that next generation? And again, I say this because I know our age, the men tend to be a little bit older. I don't think it's too late for you to teach that to your kid, even if he's 35 and he's a parent. Walk him through something. I'm always amazed because I didn't have a dad. So you have to understand, I'm always amazed that my kids want my advice because I didn't have that from anyone. So when my oldest calls me last week because he's changing jobs and he's going through something, like, Dad, I need your advice. I'm always like shocked. I'm like, why would you want my advice? Oh, because that's how it really works when you have a dad. That person speaks into your life. So I'm privileged and honored to be able to do that, but it's still shocking to me at times. Mm-hmm. But he's 25. So I think we can still do that. I see, the amazing thing is these guys that their dads are in prison, they still want that. They still need that.
That's right.
So I don't think it's too late no matter what you've done. Satan will tell you it's too late. You can't do that. You're terrible. How about correcting it and fixing it and trying to model that now, even for an older child?
Yeah, amen. Mike Johnson is my guest. When you mentioned fathers in prison, I instantly thought of C.J. Stroud. And this guy,
right?
We live in a world that has turned its back on God, and we have a Christian men's ministry, not necessarily a church ministry, because we believe it's essential to teach men to find out who they are in Christ. And for those that say, I'm not buying it, you look at a guy like C.J. Stroud, no dad, and he just emulates and oozes leadership and patience. And a lot of people are like, who's C.J. Stroud? He's a quarterback for the Texans, I think, still. Yeah. So KMG is Kingdom Men's Gathering. KMGministries.com is our website. We've gone through so many different seasons. We just lost our major donor, and so we're in like, okay, now what? But I want to tell you a short story and then anything that you have in response. I had a conversation with somebody in another part of the country a couple nights ago that didn't know who we were, but somehow we got in their radar, and they're like, I like a lot of what you do, but the Christian thing, And I'm like, time out. You got 5 minutes? And I told them the story that we are a men's ministry that understands the truth of the Bible. But I mentioned you, me, we're the two main guys. Our heart is for manhood and to get guys right. And the guy goes, you're starting to talk my language. And I said, yeah. We have this lie that's perpetuated, we believe, by the evil one. His name is Satan, whether you believe he's there or not, that hates men, hates manhood. And so he said, and I didn't have an answer. This is what I'm going to ask you. He said, can you kind of give me like 2 minutes on what KMG is, other than it's just a men's ministry? And I really didn't have a response. I mean, I kind of hemmed and hawed, and we do this, and we've done that. We have a retreat, blah, blah, blah. But he's like, we're in trouble as men. He goes, that's all you needed to say. So for the viewer, the listener, when we talk about KMG, we're not necessarily some high-profile national ministry where everybody knows who we are, but if it's one guy at a time, so be it. So if someone says, hey, Pastor Mike, I know you're a pastor, a church locally, you're an athletic director, we want to get into the rubs, you're a businessman, and also you've got some kind of a men's ministry. How would you tell somebody that didn't know what KMG is what KMG is?
That's funny. I always just say I'm a guy that screws up daily that's just trying to get it right. And I think that sums up most men. right? It's hard. Even the guys you think
Oh boy.
have it together,
Come on.
they're going through the same stuff. And so for me, I don't try to make it very complicated. I think God has allowed me to get through a lot of stuff in life. And God and I argue about that. But guys need to know there's hope and there's a way to get out of it. And I do think they need a level of knowledge of what masculinity looks like. It's not necessarily going out shooting guns, riding horses, killing a boar, all things I like to do. That's not it. I know plenty of men who are men that you can count on their word. They do what they say they're going to do. I think if we started right there, like just getting men to do what they say they're going to do. But for me, I try to dumb it down. I'm not very smart. And for me, it's literally just, hey, I'm a guy that screws up daily. I'm probably going to let you down. I'm probably going to let you down. I'm going to let you down. But I'm trying to do the right thing. And I think if we can just get guys to going in that direction, understanding that there is this, but that ultimately the trajectory's got to be going towards Christ-likeness. I just don't know that we always use those words.
Follow up to that. There's an expression I've kind of have a bit of contempt for, even though there's truth in it. I'm not a fan of cliches, but we hear a lot about COVID changed everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it did, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
So for KMG, before COVID and before I did my bye-bye to afternoon radio where I had a larger platform, we were doing gatherings, 3,000 guys.
Right.
Guys seemed like they were on fire for the Lord. Then February of 2020 happens. We do our last one at Faithful Central, which was a powerful one.
Sold out.
And then we navigate through the lockdowns and everything else, and then you can't get guys to come together. They're afraid to even like be around each other.
I think it was afraid at first. I think the world's just changed to where everything is this.
Tell me more.
Right? I think it got very convenient to just be online. It got very convenient to make it about your comfort. That's what I really think. I can even use an athletic director example in this. Before COVID, you never changed games. If it was on the schedule, you played. Now people are very comfortable just calling the day of and saying, hey, we can't do that. And now that stemmed from that year where people were trying to play sports and somebody would end up with 3 cases and they'd be like, we can't come today. And so there became this just comfort level of canceling things and not going out and doing actual things. For me, that's what I think it is. I think guys, when you were on the air and we would have an event for 3,000 people, the only way they were going to see Daryl Strawberry or any of the other guys was to come to the event. There's 1,000 different ways to see guys now. And that's why this podcast was so important. And we were I'll just say you were late to the game getting on it. I'm joking, of course. But because we still want to be able to share with what we share, we just had to pivot a little bit. That doesn't mean we wouldn't love to have an event with 3,000 people. I think that would still be ultimately our goal. But you just told me that Rob's or which podcast reached 12,000 people? Brian's 12,000 people. That was 5 events. And then we didn't have to rent a church. We didn't pay $29,000 to have the event. You literally just went digitally on. So again, it's a paradigm shift that the world has made. They've made a complete pivot to digital. I don't necessarily like it. I'd rather go to church. I'm the go to church guy. I would rather have an event like we used to have. I hope when we do one in LA or when we schedule our next one that there's 3,000 guys there, because I do think there's more power in that. I think there's something about community worship. I just think there was a pivot and everybody got comfortable with it. Politics, whatever it was, that was the pivot. My middle son was talking about, because he works at the school too, that kids don't even care about missing school nowadays because they got used to it because they watched school online. And so one of the kids that he watches was like, he missed 14 straight days. And he was like, yeah, I just didn't feel like coming. Can you imagine if you or I missed? I didn't even have parents. I was raised by wolves. But if I would have missed 14 days of school, you would have got, well, I think you would have got kicked out.
Yeah.
Everything changed. COVID did change everything. Maybe not COVID, but our reaction to COVID changed everything. And I just think that it's much easier for people to get on and watch you and I do this than to actually drive to Long Beach to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I agree with it. I just think if we don't pivot, if there's not a paradigm change, then we're a dinosaur that no one sees anymore.
Yeah, that's well said. Mike Johnson is my guest. Is there any benefit in, I mean, here we are 3-4 years after all of this madness. Some people are kind of coming out of a deep coma, like, what just happened?
Right.
Some of the things we were told didn't necessarily pan out as the truth. And where am I now?
Right.
So are we in a season where maybe it's time to be discerning and maybe get back to some basics, as well as this new culture we live in, this digital world where we have AI now? And oh, don't get me going, I have an AI story that's very troubling. But, I mean, how do we go day to day? I mean, I'll digress a moment. Mike, I wake up in the morning, and sometimes when I get some good sleep, I wake up and I'm like rested and I feel good, and then it hits me. Oh, yeah, this world's a mess. Evil doesn't even hide itself anymore. How do we navigate through the day? And then we know this is the day the Lord has made. May we rejoice. I get that. And I think that how someone lives, not just as a lie, but lives in this day and age without faith in Christ, I mean, is beyond me. It's a mess out there, brother.
It's a mess, but you always have to keep in perspective, too. This is the bad news. You and I in Los Angeles live at the gate of hell. I go visit my mom in Ohio or go see a friend. My daughter goes to school in Montana. They don't live like we live. They're still out doing things. They never stopped doing things. I'm walking. I'm trying to park my car out front today. There's 2 women walking down the street with a mask on, walking their dogs outside. No one in Ohio, other than maybe the first 6 months, ever did any of that stuff. So you and I only see what's here, and I have to remind my family all the time, this is the gate of hell. Politically, all of that stuff, it's right here. So we're still immersed in stuff that they never even dealt with. I do think it's a hybrid. I don't think that it ever comes back to 5,000 men events. I hope it does. I hope that somehow we figure that out. I think it's a combination. And ironically, you and I talked about this before COVID even hit with KMG. It's more of KMG pop-ups where it's instead of 6 speakers, it's 3, it's 2 hours instead of 5.
Yep.
It's online so that people can get online and see it. You know, we talk about, we have KMG guys in Texas, we have them in Ohio, we have all these guys. Well, they can't come. You're meeting on a Wednesday night with these guys. You can't hold that. I know you always say it. I always laugh when you say it. You're like, oh, God, someday we'll get back into a building. If you did that, you'd have 3 guys.
Yeah, that's true.
But you have 20 guys because you have this medium. So it's not all bad. And so we just have to make sure that we don't get caught stuck in 2019, the good old days, because the world just pivoted and we have to make sure we pivot along with it.
Yeah, amen. Sometimes life throws certain things your way where you got to pivot. I had Jeremy Stallnecker on a few podcasts ago. He wrote a book called March or Die, former Marine, told a story about Iraq where literally he had to march, or that would be it. One of the many things you have helped me with my perspective in, and we don't need to get too deep in the weeds, but you've had some challenges recently, and one of the many things that you stand for and challenges me is to really, almost every day, how do I want to say this? You could say it much better, but not necessarily even see the goodness in every day, but appreciate the day, do things, get out, live life. You've done that kind of as a motto, partly out of necessity, but it really speaks to me like, I know Mike has had challenges, but in the battle, he's just not folding up the tent. He's like going out and doing things. So whether it's going hunting or get out with your wife or do those kind of things, like living life. So here's a big softball, and you can go anywhere you want. Are we a dead culture? Are we worshiping death? I don't mean necessarily literally, but figuratively.
Well, I think it goes along with victimhood. If you can say, I think, and you talk about the young kids nowadays, but I think it really goes with everyone. You know, it's somewhere in the last 4 or 5 years, it became great to be a victim, right? I think one time I spoke at Man Camp about this. If you say that you were abused or that you're this or this or that, and I'm a victim, you're actually celebrated nowadays. So I think in some ways it is a dead culture because you are hoping to be celebrated for something that was bad instead of how you came out of it. Like we used to celebrate victors, and now we celebrate victims.
And not to interrupt, but almost as if not only do we not celebrate victors, they're attacked these days.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's an upside down world we live in where you have to think through things, and you're like, wait, can I even say that? And I did pause there. I was literally like, can I say that? And I think I'll jump into this. I'm a 3-time cancer survivor, all since COVID. So I always joke with people that, I had the C word. Stop it. I've had cancer 3 times since then, 3 different cancers, 3 different treatments, I'm still going through treatment for the last one. And the first one was kidney cancer. Daryl Strawberry and I joke because I think he lost a full kidney. I only lost a half. He calls me a wuss. But, and then literally a year later, I have my kidney removed, half my kidney. Literally a year later, I'm diagnosed with prostate cancer. And literally a year and a half later, I'm diagnosed with my prostate cancer's back, even though I don't have a prostate, which is terrible. How do you get that? Like, that doesn't even make sense. And so there was a lot of struggle there. And so when you face those adversities, and you go through all the treatments and you go through the hell of throwing up every day for 6 months, and there's some real fear there. There's fear the first time. When you hear the first time that you have cancer, like I can remember that day sitting in the doctor's office and there was a view out of the valley. It was down in Woodland Hills, and he was like, "You have cancer." And then I didn't hear anything he said for the next 5 minutes. I'm just looking out over the valley, like it's surreal. Mm-hmm. And then a year later to hear her say, "Damn it, the doctor said it is cancer. You're going to have to do this, and you're going to have basically the same surgery, and we're going to remove this, and you're going to be in the hospital." And again, that was during COVID, so I literally had to go in there by myself. Can I tell a funny story outside? I'm in there in the hospital because my wife is my advocate. She works in healthcare. She does everything. They won't allow her in. So I go in, I have the surgery, I come out, and I'm in there like 2 nights or something, and I'm totally narked up, right? And I'm in a lot of pain, but I've got the TV on, and this was in September or October, and I ordered like a $4,000 Christmas tree, and I ordered like a stairs for the dog. We had a little dog at the time to get up on the bed because it was so hard for me in the first surgery. I kept having to lean down to pick up the dog, and I was hurting myself. I was like, I'm never doing that again. So I ordered like $5,000 worth of stuff. My wife was like, "You will never have surgery again alone." We did not keep the tree. And then to come back the third time and have to go through 45 days of treatment or whatever it was, 40 days of treatment, and still doing treatment to this day, a year and a half later, which wrecks my body. I hate it. You have a choice in that moment. I'm either going to fight or I'm going to become a victim. The first one, I instantly said I'm going to fight. The second one, there was some negotiation, but within 2 or 3 days, I said I'm going to fight. The third one, took me 30 days. I said, I'm not doing this. And my wife, praying woman, she's the one that should be on this podcast, not me. But she just kept praying, let him get through it. He's got to get through it, and then he'll fight. God give him that strength. And it took me 30 days. It took me 30 days to grasp, okay, I will start radiation. I'll start hormone treatment. I'll start this stuff that I don't want to do. And then really a pastor told me, he was like, I just want you to hear this. And he didn't say this, but this is what I heard. This one, I think he did say this. This cancer, this third cancer is not about you. It's what everybody's watching is going to see. And it's going to be your testimony. What I heard was, this is not about you. You're going to die. Right. But however you handle your death, your basketball players are going to hear this. That's what I heard. I think if he was sitting here, he'd be like, that's probably not my intent. But it was kind of my wake-up call. It was literally like, okay, I don't have a choice. But in the meantime, my wife and I have a saying that I'm good till I'm not. And if we have a weekend and we decide we're gone. Like, I'm out. I'm going to go do something. Like I said, I literally, with 2 hours notice, decided to go to Phoenix to the Final Four last week. Like, I'm just going to I work my tail off, whether it's Heritage or KMG or, the Manny Pacquiao thing a little bit sometimes. Whatever it is, I'm a workaholic anyway. I don't rest well. So the only way my wife knows that I will rest is if we go. So we just go. And she's kind of adapted to it. It's funny. She was kind of Mom, I need to be around my kids all the time. And now she's like, when are we going? Where are we going? What's this week? So yeah, I do feel like you are given this life. I got a funny piece of mail from Purdue University the other day that said, life insurance. I was like, oh, I'm never getting life insurance again. Like, I've got it. There's no one giving me new life insurance because I don't know. I don't know that when I go in for my checkup next week that they say, hey, it's stage 4 and you don't have any time left. I'm not going to waste any time. I don't. And I don't care. I'm probably a nicer guy in some ways, and I'm probably a lot less nicer. I don't deal with drama at all. If you're bringing drama into my life, you're out of my life. Sorry. And my wife's like, that's tough. And I'm like, no, it's not. For a guy who's been told, because the last cancer, they used a different word than the first two. The first two, they said it was curable, and the third one, they said it was manageable. And that woke me up. I was like, what's manageable mean? Well, we're going to do this, that. You're going to do treatments for 2 years, and then we'll see. We'll see. Because the first two, you said, if we take these out, you're cured. Well, I'm not living a manageable life. That's not what I'm going to do. So, again, you bring drama into my life, you're out. You bring peace into my life, you're in. I'm very tight with my inner family. My wife's always like, you need more friends. And I'm like, I don't know that I do. I have Frank. I have my 2 boys. My daughter is the best of all of them 3. And I have my wife, who's my best friend. Like, I don't need a bunch more. No offense to anyone else, but that's my circle. And we're going to go do things, and we're going to have fun. And I'm not saving money for them. They all got better jobs than me now anyway. And so live life. Don't live a manageable life. I think that's what Satan wants. That's that comfortable level Satan wants, right? Like, he wants. My grandfather was somewhat where I would end up all the time growing up. Big farm, 200 acres, because he was the safe space. And no money, right? The money was livestock. So there would be a big celebration once a month where we would eat well. There would be, hey, we're going to make caramel popcorn tonight. We're going to go sled riding. Like, those were the things then, right? You didn't have to go to the Final Four in Phoenix. You did. But he taught me, my family taught me, even when there was nothing back then, that you don't live a manageable life. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to be, because I think that's a poor example for guys too. I think that guys that don't get out and explore, we're created to explore. We're created to go out and have adventure. That's right. Men without adventure, men without purpose are often soft, doughy guys that don't want anything in life anyway. Let's be adventurous. Let's go out and enjoy life. I'm sad that it took me 3 cancers maybe to get to that spot. But I guess that's the way the dice came out.
Mike Johnson is my guest. I don't need to preface anything. You know me well enough. But something is really pronounced in my spirit, and I just want to spend a moment with it. So you're a father of 2 boys, And you just alluded to Micaiah.
Yeah.
Father to son is a dynamic that cannot be replaced. And yet when you talk about father to daughter, it's a whole different world.
That daughter thing's hard.
Yeah. Tell
Like
us more.
they're great, like from 0 to 8 when they think you walk on water. Like I remember my daughter bringing me a balloon that was popped and she was like, fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the trust they have in you. And you hope that carries through to when, I think she's 20 now, 2021. You hope that carries through, that obviously she has the understanding that you can't fix the pop balloon, but that maybe you can fix something else. The intentionality of when it gets tough, when they start getting those hormones and there's this rage that I used to say, I'm not scared of much. I'm not scared of much. I used to be scared to walk by my daughter's room when she was 15. Like I'd be like, what's in there today? Like I could get yelled at in there. Like no one else in the world would yell at me like that. But it's that making sure they know they're good enough, that they don't have to sacrifice anything, that they're as good as anyone else, and that whoever's going to take care of them, whoever it is that they finally meet, and she has met probably the one. I would say 90%. Right? And wait for that guy to show up on my step all the time to finally ask me. And it's so funny. You try to teach them their worth, right? And they have a different relationship with their mom. Her and her mom are tight. They're like, I don't want to say sisters because I don't think, but they have more of a friend relationship. I feel like for me, I'm the problem solver. I used to always tell all my kids, but especially her, because girls can be dramatic. You're fearful when you see me be fearful. But if I'm not fearful, you don't need to be fearful. Now, that puts a lot of pressure on us as dads, right? Because we have to hide some things. We don't sit down at the table and tell them about our finances or that we lost a job. And we don't add fear to them. So sometimes we have to, I think that's the honor of being a dad, is that we have to hold things in sometimes. I'm sure there's a clinician right now saying that's why you're so screwed up, Mike. But we have to protect them. And I wanted to make sure that the guy that got her had that same quality. I don't really have a doubt. So I hated every boyfriend she had before that because I could see the immaturity, right? I think the number one tenet for a man, when you know a man is when he can take care of others and not just himself.
That's right.
And I see this guy take care of her, and that's my pride and joy is my girl. And it's tough because there's times where I want to intervene and be like, I can fix it. But I'm like, no, he needs to fix that. But yeah, I think daughters just always have that piece of you, and then she looks just like her mom, and that makes it tougher too. You're like, oh. But I think parenting the daughter for me was much harder than the boys. The boys you could whack around and tell them to go be quiet and sit in a corner. Right. I can literally remember walking into a store with Molly and Micaiah, my daughter, and she was probably 8. And I said something about, she always was carrying junk. Like she was like a hoarder. And she had like 3 Barbie dolls and then, and I said, let's just go put half of your junk back in the car. Didn't mean anything about it. Probably said it like I say things, matter of factly. And I saw both of them look at me and I was like, what just happened? And my wife had to pull me aside. She called her stuff junk. And she's crying, dad's the worst. And I'm like, what? I say that to the boys all the time. It's different. It's a different guiding. It's a different, I think it's harder.
I'm going to share a story. I may have told you, maybe I didn't. And I'm just compelled, there may be one viewer, one listener where this is meant for them. About a year ago, my truck that's pretty tired was on the blink and I had to rent a car. So I went to the local car agency and I walk in and it's 2 young women behind the counter. They're bubbly and how can I help you? And I kind of give them the get-go and they rent a car. And I'm out and about. And I'm driving and I go to my mechanic and there's another car rental agency, same brand, go unnamed, down the street. And I'm having a problem with this car, so I went in and there's 2 young ladies behind the counter there. And my thought was, did they not have guys working at this place? Whatever. So the one woman walks in and I'm on the phone with my son and there's some drama going on. I hang up and she goes, "You need to write a book." And I'm like, "Pardon me?" And she goes, "I kind of heard a little conversation." And all of a sudden I just felt led, well, actually I did write a book. And she kind of looked at me and I said, "Do you have faith?" And she's like, "I'm Christian." And I said, "Give me your address. I'll mail you my book, whatever." There's a point to the story here. So I leave and something in my spirit said, you need to go back in there and tell them what I'm going to tell you to tell them. And I'm at a point in my life where, you know me well enough, kind of unorthodox. I'm like, okay. So I go back in with the books. I give them to them. And the Lord said, tell them that they are my beloved daughters. Okay. I do it. Meltdown. Both of them weeping uncontrollably. The one goes, "Can I give you a hug?" And I'm like, whoa, what just happened here? So I leave, and then I have to return the rent-a-car 2 days later to the other place. And the Lord said, do it to them too. I don't think so. I'm getting uncomfortable. Do it. Same thing. I walk in. Ashlyn's like, "Hey, out the car." And I go, "I need to tell you something." I had my books as kind of the medium. And I said, God loves you as his beloved daughter. Well, not only did they both melt down, but it got to be a scene in the car place. Like people are waiting and the women behind the counter are weeping. And they're like, what did this guy just do? But here's the point of the story. I left and I'm thinking, what just happened? And the Lord did a download in me. We have a men's ministry where my sights are crosshairs are with men. I don't even think about women. And it was like, a lot of women are really hurting out there. They didn't have dads. They don't know who they are. And I always get back to the example of you with your daughter from the outside. I mean, I don't know much, but you look like you are a good dad to her. She loves you. She's kind of like the perfect daughter, if there's such a thing. My daughter, we kind of have a rough season we're going through, but I just thought there's so many broken people in the world. And when it comes to our kids, whether it's sons or daughters, they really need to know they are loved, not only by us, but our Father above all, and how much he loves us as his sons and how much he loves his beloved daughters. And there may be somebody listening or watching right now, they needed to hear that. Because I do some weird stuff, but that was way beyond me to go in and tell 4 young women that I don't even know that God loves them as their beloved daughter, and to have that kind of response just typifies that we, our youth need adults and dads to step up and tell them that there is a God in heaven that loves you. And I love you too. And I make mistakes and all that other stuff. So I think all that to say this, fatherhood, and you alluded to it, man, we got to stop embracing that fatherlessness is normal. We got to start fighting back for that stuff.
I think that's where society in America is crumbling. Like, again, we have to keep the realness of, hey, not everywhere in the world is fatherlessness gone. We sit at the gate of hell. Like in LA, it's okay. California, it's okay just to not be a part of it or to be selfish in it. I don't think it's as bad everywhere else in the world. It's still bad. Don't get me wrong, but we can't allow it to become the norm. Like you said, there's so many things that you can say that empower your children, and you don't even realize it. And again, I might be a little bit more acutely aware of it because of the lack of father in my life, that I want to make sure that I say things. But I'm an introvert. And 2 of my kids are introverts. Both of my boys are. Even though my one is a pastor and he speaks in front of thousands and him and I are the same. Like we'd rather just sit in the room. Like my wife will joke because my 2 boys and I can just sit and watch a game and not say a word in 2 hours. Her and my daughter have to talk the entire time. They FaceTime and it's nonstop. The boys and I can have the same connection without saying anything, but I have to find ways sometimes to let them know that they're valued and loved. My middle son is a super introvert, and I will try at least once a month. That sounds terrible, but to walk by the room as I'm going to bed and be like, you're loved and valued. And he'll joke and laugh like, I know, that's stupid. Why are you saying that? But I think we need to make sure as men that we say those words because they're so important to hear. Like it brings you to tears to talk about it. What is it about just saying that for just affirming our children that they're doing a good job? But I think with that, they have to be able to see, I'm just stuck on this right now. They have to be able to fail and then know that you're still there for them. And again, I'm not saying fail like become homeless and make 10 bad decisions in a row. But when things are tough, you got to let them go through it. You can let them know you're there. And I'm not saying this is easy, but I think even the kids that have had it easy in life need to know how to buckle up.
Yeah. Mike Johnson is my guest. Two things, and we'll wind down. I'll save the best for last. The one before that is, how do I articulate it? Drawn a blank on how I can word it. So I'll put that on the shelf for a moment. It's not a 68-year-old moment. There's a,
You didn't forget.
No, there's like a block going on. And that's a battle. Lately, I get this a lot. I'm like, okay, am I first step to senility? Am I losing it? Because I'm going to be 69 in a couple months. And, I think I'm 30 inside and your body doesn't think so anymore. And the mind is something that you have to continually work. It's like a muscle. So I have a little running joke with myself like, uh-oh, what's that guy's name? Uh-oh, here it comes. So I'll put that on the shelf for a second. It might not have been that important. And so what I said would be the latter is going to be the next, and then maybe it'll come back. Complete 180. One of the joys in your life is barbecuing, cooking, and then you cooked up something that came up in the group last night. I told you. One of my main guys said, hey, I have the sponsor for the Frank Sontag podcast.
Yeah.
It's Pastor Mike's Rubs. And I'm like, it's a fantastic idea. So talk a little bit about how all that happened. And that's obviously a joy that you love to do.
Yeah, I think it's funny you bring this up. So again, I get cancer. This is 2020, 19, 20, I don't know. I get it for the first time. I'm coming off a rough season where I'm coming out of ministry and kind of going back into the real world. And my wife and I take this trip to Florida to see this. Basically, he's a pastor whisperer. 5 days of intensive training, not training, counseling. Like he's just ripping your inner soul out.
Oh, boy.
And he really comes down to, I'm an A-type personality. I don't rest well. I don't really have hobbies. My hobbies were coaching my kids, coaching. Well, because I'm so intense in coaching, it's not a hobby. It's a lifestyle.
Right.
So he's literally day 3, day 4. He's like, "What's your hobby? What's your hobby? What's your hobby?" Well, I love to eat. That's my hobby. That's a terrible hobby to have, by the way. And my wife and we're down in Tampa, Florida. We go out to eat, and there's this barbecue pit. Everybody loves barbecue. I'm like watching this guy cook, and I'm like, maybe that's it. I'm just going to start smoking meats. So we come back. I had to write it down in an action plan. Still keep my action plan in here from this guy. And one of the things was you got to have a hobby. And you not only got to have a hobby, I want accountability that you do something at least 2 hours a week in this hobby. Okay. He was like, because your brain doesn't ever turn off. And so you don't ever have a relaxation mode. So then you burn out quickly on things. Okay. So we write down that I'm going to start barbecuing. Come back, I buy a smoker almost immediately, and I start barbecuing. And then I get diagnosed with cancer, and I'm like, go through that year of fighting the cancer, and I see that I'm not really doing my hobby. I didn't feel like it, and you didn't really feel like eating because of everything. And a buddy of mine gives me a Christmas gift, and it was a chopping block, basically, and a meat rub. And I was like, and it was just a commercial meat rub. And I was like, what a great idea for Christmas. And my wife's, right, always smarter than you, she walks by and she goes, you should make rubs. She goes, that should be your hobby along with smoking meats. And I was like, oh, cool. So like 5 years ago, I make a rub. I sit down, it takes me like 5 days. I start for all-purpose rubs. I start making it. And I made like one batch that had like 20, and I gave it away to men for Christmas. And I thought, what a great idea. Never thought anything else about it. Didn't do anything with it the rest of the year. The next Thanksgiving comes around, and this guy says, hey, are you going to give those rubs away? I'd like to buy some. And I'm like, that's interesting. And I used it all year for myself. It was good, really good. And I was like, okay. So I make a batch, and I just kind of throw it out on Instagram, and I call it KC3. Well, at the time, it was KC2, because I'm now kicking cancer's ass for the second time. Right. So everybody's like, what's the relation with Kansas City? Nope. Kicking cancer's ass 2. So my company was called KC2. And I probably sold like 100 jars of rub that year. And I added a new one. So I had my all-purpose, then I add the seafood rub, which is my favorite still to this day. It's the best one. And so then the next Christmas I sell maybe 200. And now I think I've got all-purpose. I've got seafood rub. I've got a ghost pepper rub, which is tough. Like, that's not for the weak. I had a buddy.
My wife loves that one.
I had a KMG buddy that passed away last year, and his name was Poncho. So I decided to make poncho powder, which is just basically Mexican spices put together. So I've got at work they call me Pongo. I'm not sure why. It's a Disney character. I don't even go by Mike. They just call me Pongo. I've never even seen 101 Dalmatians. I don't even know what it is. But I made Pongo powder, which is just salt and pepper. So I started making all these, and I sell them year round. I have a website, kcsmokedmeats.com, and you can buy the rubs. But ironically, it was just, and then I had to change it to KC3 when I got cancer again. I was like, mother bleeper, I got to change my company. I had to go to the website, change all that stuff. I'm like, if God makes me do this a fourth time, just on the rub part, we're going to have a real problem. But yeah, so it's fun. It's a passion of mine. It's a weird passion. Like, I love seeing when people go back and post on Instagram when they've used it, and I think it's actually pretty good stuff. I don't know, people. When you name anything after cancer or you bring up cancer, no one will tell you the truth anyway because they feel bad for you. So it might just be terrible gasoline, and they might be like, yeah, this stuff's terrible. But
I doubt that.
Yeah, that's my hobby.
So KC Smoked Meats.
KCSmokedmeats.com is the website. I think the Instagram is KC3 Smoked Meats.
I think we need to have a conversation off air about sponsor the program.
Yeah, right.
I'd love to do that at the beginning of each show.
Nice, pretty right there.
We could do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mike Johnson is my guest. All right. So, let us put the ribbon on in this way. And I don't want to, again, I'm being redundant here. I hate cliches because I want to go, so where do you want to be in 5 years? Blah, blah, blah.
Alive.
Yeah. Alive and living life to its fullest.
Yeah.
Part of what I wanted to get into before that I blanked on was Manny. You are spiritual advisor to Manny Pacquiao, who is, I guess he still has that spark to fight.
Yeah, I think he's still trying. Like, I keep seeing things that he's going to fight in July in Saudi Arabia, and I've not heard anything officially, but I think he'd like to get one more real fight in. Manny has this world of boxing, and then he has his Christianity world. They don't intermingle. Like, you never get to talk about the boxing except for fight week. You might just ask, like, how's the fighter, or this, that, the other. So there's never, like, you're never on the inside of when there's going to be a fight or anything like that. I find out just like everyone else finds out on ESPN or on the ticker. But yeah, so it's a super weird, awesome relationship that developed when he was attending one of the campuses I was pastoring at. His uncle was attending church there. He had just come to Christ. And at first, maybe the first 3 or 4 years, it was a nothing. We'd go to fights maybe. And then the Mayweather fight, I was working at Shepherd Church, and we had him come on as an interview with Pastor Dudley Rutherford. And we all just kind of build a trust. And we never ask Manny for anything. I've never asked him for anything. He'll give me tickets. He'll there'll be a hotel room fight week. But what it basically started as is about 7 years ago is when he's in the United States, which he lives in the Philippines. But if there's fight in the United States and he's coming in to train, he usually comes in about 45 days ahead of time. And every Saturday night, he wants a Bible study at his house. He'll literally open his house up to anyone. You can come. There's 250 people there sometimes on a Saturday night, and he'll feed everyone. And he'll want a Bible study, which is really a sermon. He'll want me to just speak. So every Saturday night for the entire training camp, I'll speak at his house. And then fight week, what happens is I'm in charge of getting speakers. It's usually Pastor Dudley is who he really wants for the last few nights, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, to come in, and we'll go over with Team Pacquiao. I think I'm on Team Pacquiao on Monday, before the fight on Saturday, and he'll have church Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, not fight day, but he'll want prayed with and everything else, and then Sunday morning after the fight, win or lose, he's there. Win or lose, he can come down looking like he got the tar beat out of him. Sometimes even on wins, to be fair, and he'll show up because there'll be 1,000, 1,500 people there waiting. His thing is he'll tell Pastor Dudley and myself, "I'll get him there. You tell him about Jesus."
Oh wow!
But this is a guy that is. I wish I could describe how on fire for God he is. There was a fight in July. I think it was 3 years ago now. He fought Keith Thurman, and he won, but he got the absolute piss beat out of him. And I'm up in his room after the fight, and his wife's literally having to feed him. Like he can't, like it went the full 12. Both eyes are swollen shut. He cannot see his food. His wife's feeding him, this, that, and the other. And Manny likes to be surrounded by pastors. And pastors like to be around Manny. Mm-hmm. And so there's probably 5 of them up there, and I'm sitting at the table trying to help facilitate whatever. And he looks at me and he goes, "Pastor Mike, I'm going to recite the book of John." And homeboy recited the book of John.
Completely memorized.
And to watch pastors, including myself, be like, "And I'm going to step out now because this guy's on a different level." I'm having trouble reciting like 7 or 8 different scriptures, and he's just tearing through chapters of the Bible in his brain after he won. Like I said, he won, but it was a tough fight. And he's just spewing out. I mean, that is a level, when we talk about being a man, people are always like, "Oh, you're just on his coattail." No, that's a guy that's serious about bringing people to Christ. And so I'm in. Like I told you, I don't waste time. I don't deal with drama. Pastor Dudley used to say him and I were just a blade of grass in Manny's life. I think we're a palm tree. When I had I don't even know, I can't keep track how many cancers I had, but one of them he literally called and he was like, "Whatever it is you need, we'll take care of financially." Well, I have good insurance, so I needed a $50 copay. Like I'm not taking that from Manny, but that's his heart. I haven't seen him in 2 years. Well, that's not true. I saw him last year. He came in for another fight, and I went over to Vegas to see him. But yeah, it's a really weird ministry. I set up the venues at the hotels, and I set up the speakers to come in. Sometimes it's just me speaking Monday through Wednesday, and then Dudley doing Thursday through Sunday. But it's the funnest ministry I have. Nothing personal, Frank.
It's all right. I get it.
But it's just a crazy thing.
And one of the many things that stands out in my mind, you talking about when Manny's here and sets up shop locally, you were doing baptisms in the pool.
Oh yeah, like he wants to make sure. Like it's not a gimmick with him. Like his heart. I often feel like sometimes, like that same fight, the Thurman fight I'm telling you about. I'm in the stands with my son. I always travel with my son to Vegas for the fights, and we're in the stands. And the fight before the main bout, which is Manny and Thurman, is over. So we're waiting. The lights are doing this, and they're showing Manny in the locker room and all this other stuff. And my phone rings, and it says Manny Pacquiao, and I'm like, huh? Like, let's be worried about the fight. And I picked it up. He was supposed to fly out that night. He was flying because he was still a senator at that point and had obligations in the Philippines. He was supposed to fly out that night, Saturday night, right after the fight. And the boxing commission said, no, you cannot travel because they make him go through a concussion protocol. We do not want you to travel for 24 hours. So he's calling me minutes before his fight to make sure that there's going to be church on Sunday morning. Wow. Can you please get the room reserved? Can you please make sure Pastor Dudley's staying? Because Dudley was planning on getting out of town. Can we make sure that all this happens? This is literally minutes before the fight. I'm like, oh, just worried about the fight. Like, I'm so worried about the fight. But yeah, it's a real thing to him. We did baptisms in the pool. This last fight in Vegas, we've done him in the pool of his house. It's a real thing to him, and he'll get up and he'll say at the end of whether it's me or Dudley speaking, he'll make sure that he endorses it, and he'll make sure he's very sensitive towards the Catholics because he grew up Catholic. His mom is still Catholic. I grew up Catholic.
Me too.
You grew up Catholic,
yep.
Right? He'll want to make sure that they know that we're all on the same team because he has a heart for the Catholics as well. But yeah, it's a crazy ministry. I haven't, like I said, I go to his son's bouts now. His son's fighting here in the United States, so I'll go down to those, but I haven't. I miss it a little bit. Like, I hope he gets one more fight.
Yeah. Amen. Mike Johnson is my guest and has been my guest. I want to be sensitive of time. You've got a busy day. Anything prominent we've got not into, or something you want to share in closing, or a story, or whatever? Let me say one little preface, and then if you have anything. So the one area I wanted to reiterate that keeps coming up, at our man camp most recently on Saturday morning, as you always do, you preached. And of the many things you said, you made reference to the Great Commission. And I'm paraphrasing, you said, the world's on fire. We don't have time to be on pause anymore. It's go time. That was like an epiphany for me, because I've been praying in this last couple of years, did we kind of lose our way? Our numbers are down for man camp. You and I have talked about this. Where are the guys that are just kind of like us versus other guys that are in seasons of their life? They're struggling with sobriety, or, they're out of prison, or their penchant is military, whatever. And when you said that, I'm like, wait a minute, that's a shift. And that's something that we're slowly integrating into KMG now, like the Great Commission. And it's go time. And what is your go? It comes up all the time. Every Wednesday night on my Zoom with the guys, they're talking about their go. Share a little bit of that, if you will. And then if you have anything else you want to put in finality. It's been a blast. I'm glad we finally got this.
Yeah, this is awesome, right?
Yeah.
I think, you asked earlier in the podcast what my thoughts were about summing up KMG. So here's the thing. I think when I preach on Saturday mornings at man camp, I want to give them application, right? Because it's easy to talk but not give steps. And I think Satan wants us all to believe, including me. Like, there's a part of me listening to this podcast and being like, listening to okay, do I want him to edit this out because I'm not worthy to talk about this? I'm not going to do this. I'm going to say this about my son, and then he's going to blow something up in the next. And so Satan will put pause in you, right, to not go. And I think that's what he's done to men in particular in the church. He said to you, you have so much shame in your life. You've done so many things that you can't go. But we forget that his disciples, when he gave the Great Commission, were all putzes.
That's right.
Like we see them as the finished project, the martyred project, the people that went out and actually started the church. But there was all this stuff before then where they denied him. They didn't believe him. They witnessed all this stuff. They did all these things, and yet he still told them to go. And I think my point is, and I'm glad you brought it up because it is kind of my point right now. I think it's, I want to say Luke, but maybe Mark, when Jesus is in the Last Supper and he's just talking to Peter, and he's telling Peter, you're going to deny me. And he says in this supper, and I'm going to get this wrong a little bit. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not Manny Pacquiao. I know you're going to screw up. He tells him, I know you're going to screw up, but I'm going to use you anyway.
Wow.
Which is powerful. And we skip that part oftentimes. But he tells him, you're going to screw up, and I'm still going to use you in 3 days to build this church. And of course, Peter's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then he does, right? Mm-hmm. And there's also this part in the final denial. If you read, and again, I'm getting my gospels all mixed up here, so save your emails. Send them to frank@kmgministries.com, not mike@kmgministries. But in the last denial, where it says they actually locked eyes, Jesus and Peter lock eyes over the fire. And here was the great thing. My pastor, Pastor Justice, was preaching on this the other day, and he said, I want to ask you, when they locked eyes, what do you see Jesus? What's his response?
Oh, boy.
My wife, who has this purity, and I told her the other day, she not only had one good dad, she had two good dads. Her dad died when we were young, and then she got a stepdad that was a home run too. So she has two good dads, and you know what she says that she sees in God's eyes when they lock eyes? Compassion. You know what I see? You're screwing up.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what most guys, I betrayed you, right? Whether it's with masturbation or porn or infidelity or anger or all this stuff. And we think that God is looking at us with his eyes and he's saying, you're a loser. Man, we need to be more on my wife's side, that he's really looking at us with compassion. I say this about I asked my 22-year-old son, Mason. I said, what do you think he saw? And he goes, I got you.
Wow.
That was actually a great parenting moment for me, because I know I didn't screw him up too much. Because what he's seeing is a reflection of what he's heard from his parents.
That's right.
And he said, I got you. I felt like a terrible person for a while, Satan, actually, because mine was, you're in trouble.
Which is the first thing that came to my mind, too.
Right. Maybe we shouldn't be overseeing a ministry. But if I'm feeling that, then I feel like guys are frozen right now, and they're not going as as Jesus told us to do. He commissioned us. It's the last thing he says on earth before he goes up, recorded, is go make disciples. And you know how books were written back then. Still to this day, the most important part, I feel like movies aren't anymore. But the most important part is the last thing, because that's what they want you to remember. So the author, Matthew, in the Great Commission, this is what he wants you to remember, is Jesus telling them to go make disciples.
Of all the nations.
Of all the nations. I think we've got to get to the point, when I talk about go, is we've got to get to that face that Peter saw of compassion, or maybe I got you, instead of what I saw and what you saw of you're a screw up. Because that's not what our God sees us as. My kids can screw up as much as they want, and I can be disappointed. I'm sure God's disappointed in me. There's never a point where I'm like, get out of my house. I don't want to see you ever again. Not yet. I think they're all over 20. I think I've passed that. But you know what I mean? Like, we know as fathers, like, you're not going to do that to Dante. Why would God do that to me? Mm-hmm. No, he's actually challenged me, because he knows all my flaws. He knows all that. Despite all of that stuff, he's telling me to go. And I just think right now in America, men are not going because they're frozen in shame. They're frozen in what they've done. And in the past, much like the Amish, I think there was a church that said you can get past this and you can go do this. And now the outside is louder than the church. If there's a complaint that I have with the church, that it's harder to be restored. There's all these processes. There's this, that, and the other. Jesus literally just said, go. Go. 24 hours, whatever. I guess it wouldn't be 24 hours because he came back and lived amongst them. But let's just say a month before that, Peter literally denied him 3 times. Which is a big deal.
Big deal.
And he said, go. And I just think nowadays, there's so much shame, and guys have access to so much stuff that they're frozen and they're not going. And that's why we have the problem in the world that we do. And so if there's maybe a theme for KMG, it is go. What is your go? Where are you going? Because if you're not going somewhere right now, then you're not living a life of fullness. Because God doesn't want anyone, Jesus does not want you frozen in a recliner, worried about your health, He's got something so much better for you. And I feel like even me, and I'm telling on myself here, there is a part of me that's fearful of dying. You have 3 cancers. You're fearful of dying. But you know what? I think back to, instead of my wife's second, her stepdad who passed away a couple years ago. He just wasn't. He was dying. He had cancer. He's laying there. And he was, I wouldn't say he was excited, but he didn't have a fear. I think that's when men were men. Mm. And again, I don't think it goes back to having to shoot a gun, kill a boar, all these things that I love to do. I think it's being who you say you're going to be on purpose, do what you say you're going to do, because I feel like that's where men suck right now. We don't follow through. Mm-hmm. And then actually getting out of our comfort zone and doing something. Go to that person that needs help. Go to that person. Go to that dad. Go to the alcoholic. Go to the guy in recovery. Go to those people that you don't necessarily want to go to because it's yucky. And disciple them. Baptize them. Teach them the ways of God. I think that's what we're trying to do at KMG, right? I don't think anybody thinks that we're super eloquent. Well, maybe you're the...
Yeah, right.
But I think that the guys that have seen what we are about know that it's just real. We care, and we know their putzes. I used to say all the time, we're pirates and vagabonds. That's the guys we like. Because if you come to me and you're perfect already, I don't want anything to do with you. Because I'd rather deal with a guy with a limp than a perfect guy.
That's right. Mike Johnson has been my guest. I often, in closing, have something eloquent to wax or whatever, but you just closed it down in a way in which I affirm that. I pray that God uses this to reach many men and women that'll listen or watch this, and just grateful for you. KMGministries.com is our website, kcsmokedmeats.com. We hope and pray our new sponsor to the Frank Sontag podcast.
Ooh-ah.
And I want to watch your time. Brother, it's been a blessing.
Fun. Yeah. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you'd had Dante call me, I would have done this a lot earlier. That's my guy.
Oh, boy. I'll tell you a story when we're done here about what happened last night. Yeah. Thanks, brother.
Yeah. Love you.
Love you, too. And thank you. We are always grateful when you watch this podcast. Let us know what you think. And we drop every Friday at 1 o'clock on YouTube at the Frank Sontag podcast. Until next time, God bless you. Have a great day. This is the day the Lord has made. May we rejoice in it. And we are very grateful for you. Support us at KMG.
Please.
Support KC Smoked Meats. And until next time, God bless you. This is the Frank Sontag podcast.